Good morning. Welcome to Think and Grow Rich Daily Hangout. My name's Sandy Levesque, and this is a daily show Monday to Friday where we read from Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich author, and at the moment we're reading from lecture notes. And so you can tune into this group to get a daily dose of prosperity consciousness and thinking that's a little bit different from how most people tend to think about success and money and time. So welcome to the show. I'm wearing a yellow and green T-shirt in solidarity with Brazil after their shocking match yesterday. I just broke my heart to watch that. It was unbelievable. It was a great example, actually, of why mental strength is really important. Because if you watched it, you'll have seen that I'm talking about a soccer match. They sort of lost their mental strength very quickly and were demolished by the German side with 4 goals in less than 4 minutes. It's just absolutely incredible in a World Cup semi-final. So, never been done before. So they sort of set history there. And what we've been reading about the past few days is basically traits of success that Napoleon had noticed amongst people that he interviewed, because he interviewed over 500 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs just about 120 years ago. So yesterday we were reading about having a flexibility and being able to be humorous, and also being able to sort of do what you say you're going to do and go a little bit further than that. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Sandy.
How are you doing?
Doing fine. You had a busy day yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I was just saying that I was wearing a yellow T-shirt and
Yeah.
green in honor of Brazil.
Oh, Brazil. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it made many headlines in the US, but the soccer here, it was just absolutely incredible. Did
Yeah.
you see it? Mm.
I didn't. I don't follow the World
Ah,
Cup. Americans. They're slow to
you don't
take on
really
that.
tend
You know
to.
that.
Yeah,
Well, Canadians do, I guess. But
yeah.
yeah.
Well, actually, from a mindset point of view, and hi, Marco Polo, we have a hello, Christian. So you're welcome to come into the Hangout. You need to join the Facebook group so that you can get the link if you'd like to read Marco Polo. So I was just saying that it was a great example, actually, of how your mindset is hugely important, because basically what happened was that it was a semi-final of the World Cup, which means there's only, they have lots of teams, and it gets down to the last 8, then the last 4, and then the last 2. So this was the last 4. And
Yeah.
Brazil are at home. They're hosting the World Cup. Football
Oh,
is
yeah.
massive in Brazil. Like it's just the lifeblood of most Brazilians.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and they were kind of expected to be, it was going to be a tight match, most people thought, because they were playing Germany, who always seem to win, even if they don't play beautifully.
Yeah.
And it just was shocking because Germany scored a goal within 10 minutes, and
Yes.
then about the 20th minute in, they scored 4 goals in 4 minutes. I mean, most people watching had never ever seen anything
Oh
like
my
it.
goodness. Oh dear.
um,
Wow.
yeah, it was just incredible. And Brazil, just you could feel they seemed to just disappear. Physically their
Yeah.
bodies were still on the pitch, but
Yeah.
their minds just disappeared, and their spirit went, and they just looked broken. And they actually lost 7-1 in the end. Brazil managed to score 1 goal in the last minute. A young
Oh
guy.
my. So you're wearing that to boost Brazil, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure that they'll be watching.
I see
Not.
Richard. I see Richard is coming on there.
Yeah, hi Richard. And also,
Morning,
Marco
Richard.
Polo asked, we can't see you. Are you there, Richard? Hmm. Okay.
He's in Nepal, right? Nepal.
I think he must be having a low internet connection, because we can see your picture, but we can't hear you. And Marco Polo, to join the Facebook group, there's actually a link in the description below for this event. If you click on the event itself, I'll see if I can find it. I'll post it in the events link, and you can just click on that and request to join it. Okay, I've just shared that. So that just click on that link, and it will take you to where you need to go. I hope Richard can come in. And for anyone else watching, because we have a few viewers live, then you're very welcome to come into the actual Hangout. Just go to the Facebook group, and that will help you get in. So moving on to the reading, we're towards the end of the third part of Your Right to Be Rich. Your Right to Be Rich, and these are lecture notes from a series of lectures that Napoleon did in the 1950s after he'd published Think and Grow Rich. So it's actually really interesting because it gives you some of the backstory to the book. Who would you like to read, or should I read, Glenn? Or what do you reckon?
We were around page 22, Sandy, I think.
Exactly.
Right? Was it?
Yeah, the top of page 22.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and read.
Yay,
Sure.
okay. Cool, thank you.
Okay, let me just kind of do the screen share,
and I'll just catch people up.
Yeah, okay.
So again, he's talking about the traits of success, basically, that he's noticed in all the people that he's met and interviewed from completing the book.
Okay, I'm gonna. Can you see it now on screen, Sandy?
I'll just come back to it. Yeah. Oh, and there's Richard.
Yeah.
Hi, Rich.
Yeah, I saw Richard.
Oh no, he's just gone. Okay.
Okay.
Go for it, Glenn.
So I'll go ahead and start here. There's only one thing that counts. That's success. Results are what counts. Results. Napoleon once wrote an epigram covering this subject that he thought was very effective. Success requires no explanations, and failure permits no alibis. In other words, if it's a success, you don't need any explanations, and if it's a failure, all the alibis and explanations in the world won't do any good. It's still a failure, isn't it? Female audience member, yes. The habit of keeping the mind occupied with that which one desires and not that which one does not want. The vast majority of instances in which people engage in personal initiative is in connection with the things they don't want. Have you ever thought of that? There's only one place where people don't have to be taught to take the personal initiative. They really work at it, work about thinking of all the things they don't want, and that's precisely what they get out of life, the things they think about, the things they attune their minds to. Now there's where the word transmute can come into play. Instead of thinking about the things you don't want, the things you fear, dislike, and distrust, think about all the things you like, all the things you want, all the things you're going to become, determined to get it. Napoleon went down to the travel agency to get his ticket changed so he could come back a different day. When he walked in, the manager of the travel agency grabbed his hand. When he saw who he was, introduced himself, and started into selling him Think and Grow Rich. Audience laughs. In a little while, he had still a hold of Napoleon's hand talking to him. A man came in, a friend of his who was connected with one of the airlines. He heard the name Napoleon Hill, and he grabbed the other hand. He also started to sell Napoleon Think and Grow Rich and said, "You may be interested in knowing that before I worked with the airline, I had a sales organization with approximately 100 people, and I required every salesman to have all of your books. That was a must." Napoleon felt pretty good as he started out. There were two very nice-looking young ladies standing on the sidewalk giving out election literature, and as he passed by, one of them said, "Say, aren't you Napoleon Hill?" He turned around and bowed. "Yes, I am. Who are you?" She said, "Well, I was at a woman's club about 2 years ago when you delivered an address, and this is my cousin here. Both of our husbands are very successful now due to the fact they have read your books." Napoleon went over to his car, and the policeman was making out a ticket. You see, all of this talk. Audience and Napoleon laughed. Napoleon said, "This is the payoff." He put a penny in there, thinking that 12 minutes would be all that he would be in there. But all of the nice conversation he was getting, he stopped to bathe his vanity in it. When he got there, the policeman was making out a ticket he had about halfway made out. The policeman didn't know whose car it was. Napoleon walked up to him and said, "Now, you wouldn't do that to Napoleon Hill, would you?" He said, "Who?" Audience laughed. Napoleon said, Napoleon Hill. And he said, no, I wouldn't do that to Napoleon Hill, but I certainly would do it to you. Audience and Napoleon laughed hysterically. Napoleon introduced himself, took out his credit card, and handed him his driver's license. He said, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. He took the tab, tore it up, and said, just forget about that. You may be interested in knowing that I'm on the Glendale Police Force as a result of reading your book, Think and Grow Rich. Audience and Napoleon laughed. The subject now is a positive mental attitude. Nothing constructive and worthy of man's efforts has ever been or ever will be achieved except that which comes from a positive mental attitude based on definiteness of purpose, activated by a burning desire and intensified until the burning desire is elevated to the flame of applied faith. Here are 5 steps, 5 different conditions of the mind, all of which lead up to a positive mental attitude. Take number 1, for instance, wishes. Everybody has a stock of wishes. They wish for this, they wish for that, and they wish for the other thing. We all have wishes. Nothing very much happens when you just wish for things, does it? Female audience member, no. Napoleon, no. Nothing happens. Then you become curious. You put in a lot of time to idle curiosity. Do you think anything ever happens worthwhile in connection with idle curiosity? However, you can and you do consume a lot of time, oftentimes with idle curiosity, don't you? You put a lot of time, oftentimes, studying what your neighbors do or do not do, what your competitors do or do not do, just out of idle curiosity. That's not leading to a positive mental attitude. A step above that, you have hopes. Your wishes now have taken on a more concrete form. They become hopes. Hopes of achievement, hopes of attainment, hope of accomplishment, hopes of accumulation of things you want. Just a hope by itself isn't very effective, is it? We all have a flock of hopes, but not all of us who have hopes have success. We just hope for success. It is, however, better than wishing for it, isn't it? What's the difference between a hope and a wish? Audience give various answers. Napoleon, that's right. A hope is the beginning of taking on the nature of faith, isn't it? That's the idea. You're transmuting a wish into the very desirable state of mind known as faith. As you step up your mental attitude to where your hopes are transmuted into something else known as a burning desire. Is there any difference between a burning desire and an ordinary desire? Female audience member, yes. Napoleon, that's right. A burning desire is an intensified desire based upon hope and definiteness of purpose. How does one go about cultivating a burning desire for anything? Audience gives various answers. Napoleon, if I didn't know the answer to this, believe me, I could get a flock of answers here, couldn't I? A burning desire is an obsessional desire, isn't it? Certainly. You cannot have a burning desire without a motive or motives back of it, can you? Wouldn't it be interesting if you kept a tabulation for 2 to 3 days of the exact amount of time you put into thinking about a no-can-do side of life and the can-do side, or the positive side and the negative side? Even the most successful people would be astounded to find out how many hours they put in each day in negative thinking. The very outstanding successes in the world, the great leaders, are the ones that put in very little, if any, time thinking on the negative side. They put in all of their time thinking on the positive side. Napoleon once asked Henry Ford if there was anything in the world that he wanted to do that he couldn't do. He said, no, I don't believe there is. Napoleon then asked him if there ever was, and he said, oh yes, back in the early days before I had learned how to use my mind. Napoleon said, what do you mean by that? He said, now when I want to think or want to do a thing, I started finding out what I can do about it and then start doing that. I don't bother about what I can't do, I let that alone. That statement was a world of philosophy. He put his mind into doing something about the part he could do something about and thinking about that and not about the part he could do anything about. Napoleon then made the suggestion that if you put a problem to the majority of people, they will immediately begin to tell you all of the reasons why the problem can't be solved. If there are some things about the problem that are favorable and some that are unfavorable, the majority of people will see the things that are unfavorable first and oftentimes never see the favorable side. Napoleon didn't believe that there were any problems in connection with which you can't do something in connection with which there are not some favorable sides too. He couldn't think of a single problem that could confront him that wouldn't have a favorable side to it. If nothing else, the favorable side would consist in the fact that there was a problem he could solve. He would solve it, and if it was a problem he couldn't solve, then he wouldn't worry about it. The majority of people, when they're confronted with difficult propositions or problems that they can't solve, they start worrying. Then they go into into what kind of a state of mind? Audience members, negative. Napoleon, negative state of mind. Do you ever accomplish anything worthwhile when you're in that state of mind? Audience members, no. Napoleon, no, you don't. You're only mud in the water when your mind is negative. You never accomplish anything worthwhile. You have to learn to keep your mind positive all the time when you want to do things worthwhile. Does a positive mental attitude attract opportunities, or does it repel it? Audience members, attracts. Does a negative mental attitude attract favorable opportunities, or does it repel them? Audience member, repels. Napoleon, it repels them, doesn't it? Female audience member, yes. Napoleon, definitely. Does that repelling of opportunities have anything to do with your merit or right to have opportunities? Audience member, no. Napoleon, nothing whatsoever. Absolutely not. You may be just, you may have the right to all the good things in life, but if you have a negative mental attitude, you will repel the opportunities leading to the attainment of those things. Your job is to keep your mind positive so it will attract you to the things that you want, the things that you desire, and the things that you're going after. Have you ever stopped to think why it is that prayer generally doesn't bring you anything except a negative result? Have you ever stopped and wondered about that? Napoleon believed that was the stumbling block of most people in all religions. They don't understand why prayer generally brings negative results. You couldn't expect anything else because there's a law that governs that. The law is that your mind attracts you to the counterpart of the things that the mind is feeding upon. There's no exception to that. If you want to attract through prayer or otherwise the things that you desire, you have to make your mind positive. You not only have to believe, but you have to put action back of that belief and transmute it into applied faith. You cannot have applied faith in a negative state of mind. The two just don't go together. Constructive mottos are often used by people who recognize what a powerful influence one's daily environment has on the maintenance of a positive attitude. The entire industrial plant of the R.G. Letourneau Company, with 2,000 employees, was positivized by placing mottos printed in large letters in all departments. Those mottos were written for a purpose. Every department in that great plant had mottos placed there regularly and sometimes daily in the cafeteria. In the other departments, it was weekly. The mottos were written in letters half a foot high so that you could read them all the way across the building. Every time they walked into their department, they saw that motto. Napoleon had an experience with them. He was standing in the cafeteria one day when the motto was placed up where all the men lined up to get their meals, and they could catch them all there at one time during the day. The motto read, "Just remember that your real boss is the one who walks around under your hat." In the final analysis, you're the real boss. Napoleon heard a man let out an Indian yell. He said, "That's what I've always said. I've always known that my foreman was a louse." Audience and Napoleon laughed. Transmutation must start with a positive mental attitude because successes, riches, and faith do not make bedfellows with negative mental attitudes. The transmutation procedure is simple. You could very well afford to come back to this many times and assimilate it and make it your own. 1. When failure overtakes you, start thinking of it as if it had been a success. Do you think that would be difficult to do? Audience members, yes. You think it would? No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't at all. In other words, thinking of it and what would have happened if it had been a success instead of a failure, seeing yourself in the success side of the situation and not the failure side, start imagining the circumstances of failures in your own imagination as being a success. Start looking for the seed of an equivalent benefit which comes with every failure. This is where you'll be able to transmute the failure into success. Every adversity, every failure, and every defeat has the seed of an equivalent benefit in it. And if you go searching for that seed, you'll not take a negative mental attitude towards the circumstance. If you take a positive mental attitude because you're sure to find that seed, you may not find it the first time you look for it, but eventually you will find it if you keep on. 2, when poverty threatens to catch up with you or has actually caught up, Start thinking of it as riches and visualize the riches and all the things that you would wish to do with the actual riches. Also, start looking for the seed of an equivalent benefit of poverty. Napoleon remembered when he was, I guess, a little boy, sitting on the bank of a river in Wise County where he was born. Just after his mother had died, he was hungry. He didn't have enough food. He sat on the bank of a river, wondering if he could catch some fish and maybe fry some fish so that he would have something to eat. As he sat there, he didn't know what caused him to do it, but he shut his eyes and looked into the future. He saw himself going away, becoming famous, wealthy, and coming back to that very spot, charging up on the river on a mechanical horse that was run by steam. He could see the steam pouring out of his nostrils, and he could hear his horseshoes clicking on the rocks. It was so vivid to him. In other words, he built himself into a state of ecstasy there in that hour of poverty, need, want, and hunger. Years passed, and the time came when he drove his Rolls Royce into that very spot. The car he paid $22,500 for. He drove it into that very spot. He went back and imagined again that childhood scene where he had been in poverty, want, and hunger. He said, well, I don't know whether my imaging this back in the early days had anything to do with it, but maybe it did. Maybe he kept his hope and he eventually translated that hope into faith, and eventually that faith brought him not only a steam horse, but something that's much more valuable, much more costly than a steam horse. Looking for and imagining the things that you want to do and transmuting unfavorable circumstances and adversities into something that's pleasant, switching your mind away from unpleasant things over to something that's pleasant. 3, when fear overtakes you, just remember that fear is only faith in reversed gear. Start thinking in terms of faith by seeing yourself translating faith into whatever circumstance or things you desire. Napoleon didn't suppose that anybody ever escapes experiencing the 7 basic fears at one time or another. Most people experience them all the way through life. If you allow fear to take possession of you and to grip you, it'll become a habit, and it certainly will attract you to all of the things you don't want. You have to learn to deal with fear by transmuting or translating it or transforming it in your mind into something the opposite of fear. In other words, faith. If you fear poverty, commence thinking of yourself in terms of opulence and of money. Think of ways and means that you're going to earn that money and what you're going to do after you get it. You can daydream, and there's no end to the daydreaming you can do. It's far better to daydream about the money you're going to have than just fear the poverty that you know you already have. There's no virtue and no benefit of sitting down and bemoaning the fact that you are poverty-stricken or that you need money and you don't know how to get it. Napoleon honestly believed there wasn't anything in the world that he needed that money could buy or anything else that could, but he couldn't get it if he wanted it. He didn't think in terms of what he couldn't get. He thought in terms of what he could get. It's a wonderful thing to condition your mind to be positive, so when the circumstances arise when you need positive mental action, you're in the habit of reacting in a positive way at all times rather than in a negative way. You don't get a positive mental attitude just by wishing for it. You get it a little at a time. You don't just get it overnight. Summarized by Andy Hausman.
Cool. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Oh, you're welcome, Sandy.
And hi, Richard.
Hi,
Good
Sandy.
morning, Richard.
Do you guys know each other?
Morning.
Have you seen each other on Hangout?
Yeah, we met online now. Yeah, and had
We connected on
a
Facebook.
conversation the other day online.
Ah, excellent. Okay, well, great to have you here, Richard. You're in Nepal still?
Yeah, I'll be here another 2 weeks, or almost 2 weeks. I'll be going to Istanbul.
Oh yes, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
I love that we have. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. What's that?
Oh no, I was just gonna say I love that we have like people tuning in from like all over the. We have
World.
I know.
Glenn in Tennessee, and you in Nepal with like the Globes fans.
Yeah.
And
Isn't the internet amazing? You know, I mean,
it really is.
Well, it's really amazing. What's really amazing is that I'm connected because Nepal has the second slowest internet in the world.
Next to
The second slowest. Libya
That's
has slower.
amazing. Well done for getting in. We can see you too and hear you. The image isn't as clear as
Yeah,
Glenn or I, but
yeah,
you're there.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm here. It's really amazing.
that's good
Yeah,
to know
it's
that it's not the
we're
second
all over
slowest
the
in the
world.
world
Yeah,
for traveling.
it is.
I'm
Um,
sure. I'm sure
It's
Istanbul
manageable.
would be much
It's
better.
manageable. I'm sorry.
I'm sure
What's
Istanbul
that?
would be much better.
Oh yeah, it's just about anywhere.
Yeah.
Better. Outside
yeah,
of Libya or
yeah.
North Korea maybe.
Oh, um,
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing. I did a search, and the funny thing is that South Korea is the fastest. It's unbelievable.
is that what?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having that. I said that South Korea is the fastest, unbelievably fast. Yeah.
Oh, South
Can you
Istanbul?
hear
Korea.
me?
Now we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
No. Okay, now you can. I said that South Korea is the very fastest in the world.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, that makes
Yep.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
with all the
Yep.
technology they've
Right.
developed.
Right. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. So you're
cool.
going to Portugal soon?
Yeah, yeah, next week. And
Wow.
actually, this
Wow.
chapter I think is really cool because it's
Yeah.
been applying what Napoleon teaches in this. That's actually I don't think I'd be going to Portugal if it wasn't for that.
Uh,
um, so for people watching, I'm moving to Portugal in a few days' time, actually, on Monday next week. Um, and this whole thing of what he's talking about, where no matter what's going on in your outside reality, you start imagining what you would actually like. I began imagining moving a year and a half ago when I was really broke and living in a tiny studio flat in Nice in France, and actually something that a really clear example of how this works, you know, where he's saying instead of allowing yourself to worry about things, start just daydreaming about what you actually would like to happen. I remember once I had a really big bill to pay, and it was almost like the entire money I was making in a month that I had to pay in one go, and you know, as
Wow.
well as paying all my expenses. And I was just literally like, how the hell am I going to do this? You know, unless some kind of miracle happens. And it was,
Right.
and the worst thing was that I had to give it to a friend. So you know, it wasn't just a faceless
Ooh.
company. It was I had to
Yeah.
give it to a friend so that
Ouch.
they could pay the bill, and
Yeah.
which is kind of harder. So I found myself, you know, for about 2 weeks after I found out how big this bill was, it would every single day I would think about it, and I was like, you know, how am I going to pay this? And then I
Wow.
remembered, then I just started reading this book for the first time ever, and I started imagining transferring the money into my friend's account. Like I literally just visualized how it would feel to be making that transaction on the online, and
Hmm.
telling her it's okay, I just paid the money in. And I started to do that every time I found myself worrying. And the crazy thing
Hmm.
was, within 2 days, I had thought of a way that I could pay it. And it took about 10 days to get it all sorted out. But, you know, I was so amazed because I
I couldn't
realized,
quite hear
wow,
you, Sandy. The money couldn't quite hear you, Sandy. You said the money showed up.
yeah, like within 2 days, I suddenly
Wow.
realized I could pay it in installments instead of just paying it all in one go, which I'd never even considered. And the company said
Yeah.
yes, and then I paid my first installment within, you know, less than a week later. So,
Yeah.
and then like it got it all sorted out. So it just, I realized, wow, if I had kept worrying that I wasn't going to pay it and what I was going to tell my friend, I would still be in that
Hmm.
same situation. But it was the imagining the better scenario that allowed a new idea to pop into my head, you know?
Hmm.
yeah.
So that's just
Sounds
like
like
a small
creative.
Wow.
example.
Yeah.
But I think what he's saying here is so powerful. And I love that story about the Rolls Royce.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
image.
Yeah.
Positive.
Wow.
And also
Yeah.
what he's saying about having quotes around your house to help you
Oh
do
yeah.
that. I think that's a really good idea.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is, right? It's great to write down, right? Write down your your dreams, right? You know, really get them on paper, you know.
Yeah.
Because I think it's and then, you know, like
Exactly.
you said, put things around the house, right, the way you want it, you know.
Yeah, it makes a difference. There's
Yeah.
something about seeing it physically on paper, in, you know,
Yeah.
stuck to a wall or a fridge or something, that makes it just seem much more real, and you start to like, not immediately. I found for me it took a little while for those things to work, but they
Yeah.
do. Like it does start. You just start to. It's like it almost makes it more official, even though you wrote it. You wrote it. The fact that it's physically on a
Yeah.
piece of paper, um,
Yeah.
and I really
Yeah.
recommend doing what Napoleon says actually in the book. This is the lecture notes we're reading, but where you write your written statements and the self-confidence formula. I've never done that before until I attended an event last week in Charlotte, and one of the speakers there, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but he was the founder of a telecall, a Think and Grow Rich telecall in America, which gave me the idea to do these hangouts at a European time. But he shared his whole story, and it was just so incredibly inspiring, about how he, at one point, you know, he was building a network marketing business and really struggling, and living in a trailer with 3 children, and he'd actually started to make some money, so he'd quit his job, but he had a full-time job before, and he thought that his income would go up because he was full-time. But what happened was that his income went down. Something happened with the company he was doing it with, and he found himself really behind on the bills, living the whole family on about $300 a month, struggling so much, and then one of his children had a medical problem, a big one, like something to do with his skull. And his wife, he came home one day and his wife was crying, and she just found out about this, and he needed a surgery, which was going to be $51,000. And this was a family that was living on less than $500 a month. And so
Wow.
he said that he had this, even I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it, because it was so, you know, a lot of people listening were crying because he was crying, because it was just, he showed us pictures as well of his son, and you know, it was really touching, and he said that he couldn't think of anything of what to do except go outside and pray, and he literally knelt on the ground and prayed to God, and, you know, infinite intelligence, you know, whatever you call it, and just said, look, I don't know what to do, I'm so scared, and I really need help. And the message that he got, or the sense that he got, was that he had to become a student of Think and Grow Rich, and he had to just not read it, but like live it, you know, like live it, breathe it, walk it, and he started studying the book, and within a year he started becoming a leader within the same company that he'd been struggling in, and now he's a multiple six-figure earner. This happened about 9 years ago, but he started his calls about 3 years ago, and so, you know, it was just so amazing. He said that every night he would walk out under the stars outside his trailer van and read this, like his personal statement and the self-confidence formula. He memorized it, and he would just say it out loud every single night, um, and that it worked. And then he asked a question. There was 2,000 of us in the room, and he said, how many of you have memorized the self-confidence formula? And about 2 people put up their hand. And I was so annoyed with myself because I hadn't memorized it, and so I couldn't put up my hand. And I thought, when I get home, I'm doing exactly the same thing. And there's something to be said, I find, for walking out under the sky and doing it. I really enjoy it. Like, I go out and I look at the stars if they're there. Sometimes it's too cloudy. And I've been saying it out loud, even really quietly, not to wake people up. And it makes a difference. Like, I find I'm not worrying about things nearly as much as I used to a year and a half ago. I don't know if you're noticing that, Glenn, from being on this group regularly and reading it every day.
Yes. You know, Yeah. I think the book itself is a wonderful book that I think personally I think should be taught to children in school.
Yeah,
No, no, I believe really it should be, and in fact, if we really want to get it into schools, we probably ought to have make it part of teachers' required education,
yeah,
right? In other words, teachers should be schooled in that so that they can put it out to the children, right?
yeah. I could
Right?
totally agree.
I think that would be a good move forward, But the other thing about his reading this morning too, or what we read there this morning, was that we all will encounter problems and sometimes discouragement, but being able to flip that and look at it in terms of success, right? Look at it in terms of something that you've gained from it, right? I think that's a powerful message. I think that's a powerful thing. And I'm sure, Sandy, you've experienced that in your life too, where you've
Yeah,
run into something, you've run up against something, right? But you've been able to take it and transmute it, right? Change it into something that moved you forward. I think
yeah,
that's a good thing. That's an encouragement to people.
exactly. What I find helps is if I come up against similar situations, even now sometimes, this is actually, I got this from Science of Getting Rich from Wallace Wattles. I remember that the money I'm looking for is out there. I don't know if this might just
No.
be some of us. I've tended to sort of have this, when you've been struggling for so long, you kind of forget there's actually a lot of money out there in the world, and it's just an energy. And so
Yes.
whenever I need money for something that I don't have in my bank account, um, I would remember, okay, this money actually physically exists out there. Universe, what do I need to do to get it into my bank account?
Yeah.
Whatever I need it for,
Well,
and that
the
would really
universe
help.
wants
Actually.
the universe wants you to be rich. The
Yeah,
universe actually
exactly.
wants you to be
It,
rich because
yeah,
if you are rich, then you are fulfilling your purpose. You are
totally.
fulfilling your purpose,
Yeah,
right? You are
exactly.
fulfilling your purpose. You're
Yeah,
not you're not you're not taking away from anybody else.
yeah,
You're fulfilling what the universe intended for you. And I
exactly.
believe that right in my heart.
Yeah, me too. And I've just seen so many examples in my own life where, as I would remember that, and then, you know, a week later I'd have the money, like something. Usually, what happens for me, I have strange ideas that come into my head. I'm sure I'm not the only
We
one.
all do.
We
We
all
all
do
do.
hunches, and I really think you have to follow them because sometimes it's not just an idea pops in your head and that means the money will come. You have to do something, like create something or talk to
Yeah.
someone, or and I found that every single time I act on those weird hunches, I get the money I require. Um, so,
Yeah.
Richard, do you have anything you want to share on this? I hope the connection's working.
Ah, I'm still playing with it.
Yeah,
But I do find, yeah, one way or another, the money does come. But it
yeah.
does help to ask for it
It
and
comes.
to believe it will come. It makes a difference. So,
Oh, we can't hear you very well, Rich. Could you hold up your microphone
oh,
again?
oh, oh,
Sorry, it
okay.
sounds a
Can
bit
you
like
hear
you're
me?
underwater. That's it. Yeah,
How's that?
that's
Okay.
much better. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do find that the money comes, one way or another, that when there's a need for it, it does come. But certainly asking for it and believing it'll come, it does come faster and easier, for sure. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And, uh, yeah, I mean, it's just that positive thinking. And I think that, I guess I'm still playing with this and still, it's in some way, I mean, it's old to me. This all this thing is old to me because, in a way, because I've heard about it for a long time. But I was doing a lot of other things that were, in a way, poo-pooing this and not and casting this in a negative light.
mm,
And just lately, having been listening to some of the your earlier calls,
ah,
around the what is it? The self autosuggestion and those things.
Yeah.
That it's starting to. I'm starting to get this feeling. Wow, maybe this is really true. I'm getting
Yeah.
that sense.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Which is
Yeah.
Yeah.
like mind-boggling. It is,
Yeah.
because
It is.
but
It's so.
yeah, yeah, because it seems like it's like I think what he says is right. That unless there is a strong emotion along with it, that's one of the missing keys.
Yeah.
That if people just keep on, what do they say, that QA, in every way and every day I'm getting better and better, and there's no
Yeah.
emotion involved with it, it has no effect.
Yeah.
But the emotional part, yeah, yeah, and
That and
I'm really
meditation too. I think.
what's that?
Yeah. Meditation, I
Yeah,
think, also is
Mm.
because it
meditation.
tunes you a little bit closer. Yeah, a little bit
Yeah.
closer. When that man knelt on the ground, right, and he connected. He really connected with the universe, is what he did,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
that was a form of meditation there.
Yeah.
Very
And
good.
going out every night and
yeah,
repeating that. He said that the more he did that, he started to have more faith that the money was out there, and that it would
Right.
come.
yeah,
Because at the end of the statement, you're literally saying, I can touch it with my hands. It is awaiting transfer to me at the time and the proportion I deliver the service. And the more I found I've only been doing this for a week or so, and it's true. Like I literally close my eyes, and I can see almost like a big not like a big check. It sounds cheesy, but for some reason that's what I see. And when I think of it, I get that exhilaration. Like
Yeah.
the emotion that Richard was just talking about, because that's really important. But I think also something I would add to that is that sometimes, to me, it felt like I had so much mud, like around or crap, that it took me a long time of doing that to get that emotion. Because in the beginning, I just couldn't even imagine how bigger sums of money than I've been used to could really come into my life, in a real way. I have to say that the more you do what Napoleon's talking about, the more you start realizing that's just an illusion, and that you have every right to it, and you deserve it, and you can have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
It almost seems like there's this dense solidity of negativity or negative emotions that can really almost solidify around us,
Yeah.
and we have to almost like melt it
Yeah.
with that intensity. And I
Exactly.
think it, it's like, well, I think you were telling me that was David Woods you're talking about, or was somebody else, but
No, his name is
was
Paul Hutchings. This guy that knelt down.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
but David Woods had a similar experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Most people have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right, and it's sort of like you have to get to a certain point where you just have this in such an intense presencing with what's really going on and the emotions of it
Yeah.
that it does melt things.
Yeah.
And you know, for a long time I was involved with the whole thing about emotions are, you just kind of transcend emotions, or you don't really deal with them, or whatever. And lately I've
Yeah.
really come to see that, oh my God, emotions are incredibly powerful and absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
And I really see that as part of this
Absolutely.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One thing I want
yeah,
to say, Richard, is you hit it right on the head. Emotions are so powerful, and
yeah,
women have that naturally, right? They have it naturally. Men
yeah,
have to go back to when they were a child and
right,
resurrect it out of their being. I think that's important.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think so. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think men have a tendency to, especially in business, can have a tendency to shut down their emotions or to
Yes. Yeah.
freeze them and be really very matter of fact and practical and flat. You know, I think that happens a lot in the corporate world.
Yes.
And somehow it can work. Somehow it works, but not really.
No, not really, not really for your lifetime, right? For your whole life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, we have a question here from, I think it's from Kunal, saying, how does a person grow emotional when suffering an insecure attachment? So I don't really have the answer, but I guess I would say from my own experience.
Sorry, Sandy, could you repeat that?
How does a person grow emotional when suffering an insecure attachment? I guess what I would say to that is, I'm not sure what you mean by insecure attachment. Actually, if you mean feeling insecure, I would say that just repetition of the exercise is one of the best things you can do, Kunal, because it will start to, like Richard was saying, it will melt all the other crap away, you know, like just doing it over and over. Like, because when I first did this, I had no emotion whatsoever with my paper. You know, I wrote it down. I even stopped doing it after a few months because I thought, well, this is pointless. I read it and I just don't feel anything. But what I found is that the more you do it, the more you do start to feel something. Especially, I find what really helps me is when I know other people have done it and it's worked. Like this guy, seeing him speak, sharing his story. You know, I've heard it on a telecall, but seeing him physically, like in front of me, sharing the story and feeling feeling the whole thing there with him, that really helped me a lot too. So I would seek out, you know, stories where people have actually used this book successfully. You know, just by tuning into this group, you'll be getting that, because that's what this whole group is about. So, yeah.
Very
We're
powerful.
actually coming up on time. Does anyone want to share something quickly before we finish? In fact, we've gone over time, but that's okay. It's great to have someone from the call here.
Have something, but if you have something, Glenn, I have something to share, but if you want to go ahead.
No, go ahead, Richard.
Sure. I'm reading this great book called Emotional Intelligence, and one of the things this guy refers to is efficacy, and it's the belief that you can do something, and it's a part of psychological theory, but and people develop this belief that they can do things. It's called efficacy, and one of the things that strengthens that is seeing other people doing something, and then I think that's part of this whole power of these.
Yes.
That when you see, and the whole empower thing is that when you see other people doing it, then it adds to your own sense of efficacy.
Very good.
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, mention the book again, Richard, because I'd like to get that too.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Daniel Goldman, Emotional Intelligence. It's kind of a classic. It's a kind of a classic. It's you know it's the basis, and it's.
Oh, go on. No, go on, Richard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think he used to write for the New York Times as a science writer. So he has all these stories, and I mean, not only does he draw from a tremendous amount of research, very, very important and useful research, but he has. I mean, he's got story after story after story, and he writes so well. It's very easy to read, but very informative at the same time, and it's mind-boggling. It's just a powerful book. I highly recommend it. Yeah. And I think it will add also to your sense of emotions. And I think one of the most important things, you know, is the whole aspect of the social intelligence, emotional intelligence, is what really makes people successful. Yes. And that's based on people's ability to be self-aware and then have empathy and awareness of others. Yeah. So that, again, emotions are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing that, Richard, too.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
That's a really
sure,
great
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
perfect for
Right.
Kinal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Get emotional intelligence for Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, and the
Yes.
funny thing is, I think a friend lent me that book at Christmas. I didn't read it. She gave me a whole stack of books. I'm pretty sure it was
Oh,
in there. So
absolutely. I
I
highly,
think this is
highly,
the
highly
universe
recommend
saying,
it.
Sandy,
Yeah.
go and read that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
I
Check
think
it
I
out. Let
will.
me know what you think. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Oh,
Cool.
well, thank you so much for coming
Well,
out, both of you, and for reading,
yeah.
Glenn.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
Thank
Thanks,
to be
you.
Lynn.
here.
Appreciate it.
It's been great meeting you, Richard, online.
Yeah, hope we can
Glad
see
to
you
meet you
again.
on, yeah, face to face,
We
live.
have to shake
We'll
hands.
Yeah,
agree
that's
at
fun.
some time. We will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much, and have a great day, both of you
Thanks.
and everyone watching. We'll be
Yeah.
back tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Great.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
Bye bye.
Well, bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.